Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary with a knife video for you. Today I just want to talk about my first knife. I want to talk about the first knife I ever bought with my own money. And I want to talk about some of my interest in knives and how it keeps going and kind of what I'm interested in now and just where all that stuff goes along. And I've got some knives here that are kind of significant steps for me, knives that I really liked and really wanted, and I thought I'd share those with you. So first off, let me show you this knife is the Charade, and essentially it's a Charade old timer, but it's the biggest one. It is a pretty blatant copy of the Buck 110. Okay, and this knife is the first knife I ever bought with my own money. So I'll let you take a look at that. You can see that there are some things that I can still appreciate about it. I think the blade shape is pretty cool. The size is pretty comfortable. I like the handle. It's comfortable in hand. Now I will say this thing is a brick, and I carried this a lot, and I honestly don't know how I did, but I can remember my jeans would actually get, because there's no clip on this, I just drop it in my pocket, and this top bolster would like sit like a log, and it would be like between your thigh muscle and your jeans, and my jeans used to wear in the exact shape of this knife. Anyway, that's the first knife I bought with my own money. We'll come back to that story in a second. But my very first knife was a Swiss Army knife. And it was given to me by my uncle, Brian. I remember he came by. We lived in an upstairs apartment. He came by and said, "Hey, I've got something for Kevin." My mom said, "Kevin, come to the door." And it was a Swiss Army knife. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And what my Uncle Brian said at that time was, "Hey, a little boy should always have a knife in his pocket." That was just... And so he believed that, and he made sure that I had a knife in my pocket. And it was kind of a weird thing because it wasn't an uncle. He wasn't like, we all have relatives that give us stuff on a regular basis. He was not that way. I think it's the only gift I ever got from him for any reason. So that kind of started it all off. And since that time, I've had a number of folders. My stepdad, who my mom married shortly after that incident, I think I was 7 when they got married, and I would have been about 6 when I got that Swiss Army knife. By the way, I do still have a Swiss Army knife, and it's not the same one. This is the Swiss Champ, but maybe it was a cadet or something that he gave me. Anyway, this knife is kind of in my collection as an homage to the very first knife that I ever had. So, my stepdad, Roy, he always carried a knife. He'd been in the Navy, and when I was growing up, he worked at International Harvester as a tool cutter grinder, very skilled at that, really good metal worker. And so he was the one who taught me how to sharpen knives and taught me a little bit about, getting a burr and all that kind of stuff. I never got really good at it under his sort of teaching, but I did my best, and a lot of times if I wanted a really good edge, I'd have to give up and say, "Hey Dad, could you sharpen this for me?" Anyway, so he always carried a knife. He always sharpened his knives and took pride in being able to put a really good edge on them. And I think that has kind of been passed along to me. Now, he carried a Charade Bruin, sort of a smaller Charade, maybe 2.5-inch blade, 3-inch blade, something like that. And it was a good little knife, and he carried it all the time for years. One time, eventually he bought a new one, and that's what got me to this. So he always carried this little green Charade Bruin, and one time he dropped it down an ice fishing hole. And he loved it so much that he even tried to tie a magnet to the end of a fishing line and lower it down and get it, which was a total waste of time. But nonetheless, that meant he needed a new knife. So the next time we went to the States, he had bought this knife in the States, and so he felt like that's what he wanted to do. The next time he went, I was with him, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to go buy a new knife." So I think we just went to Walmart. I don't even remember for sure. But he saw there was the knife that he always carried. They had it in stock, so he's like, "Hey, I need that knife." And, while he was doing that, I thought, I'm going to buy a knife too. I had some money in my pocket, as usually you do if you're going on a trip. We were on a family trip to the States, and so I took some of the money that was for the trip, and I bought this knife. And I remember when I bought this knife, okay, and this still kind of twigs with me. I looked at all the knives that were in there, and I recognized a lot of them. And I'd seen something like that before, but this one was a little different. It wasn't like the knife my grandpa carried or any of my uncles carried or my dad carried. And when I was a kid growing up, everyone in the country, everyone had a knife on them. So I'd seen a lot of folding knives, but this was different than the ones that I was used to seeing. And so I thought, hey, this is pretty cool. And I bought it. And I carried this for a long time. I think I mentioned to you that I can remember my jeans wearing in the shape of this knife. It sat in my pocket for many, many years. And once it came out of my pocket, it went in my car door and it rode like in the little map compartment in my car for a long, long time. And so this was my knife for many, many years. Now, it's in pretty rough shape at this point. I did clean it up and it was way worse than this, but now there's just a little bit of rust left on it. There is a teeny bit of blade play. There's some scratches on the blade. And so this knife was one that kind of initially got me going, and even this knife reveals something about my preferences in knives, because at the time there weren't a lot of knives that I'd seen like this. Now I know it's a copy of a Buck 110, which was insanely popular, but in Canada not a lot of people carried Buck 110s. I've seen some since that time. So anyway, this knife was the one that I carried for a long, long time. Now somewhere along the way I saw somebody carrying one of these little Gerbers, and I bought it. I carried this for a while. It's not very big, of course, and it is a frame lock. I wouldn't have known to call it a frame lock at the time. And it has a serrated blade. Now, I will say this serrated blade is the reason I still don't like serrated blades. From the day I bought this, I kind of thought the skeletonized handle was cool when I was a little older at that time. I think I was married. But this was the only knife I carried, and I didn't like the serrations right from the start. But I was like, well, I'm not buying a new knife just for serrations. I'll just make it work. So I did for a long time. Eventually, as you can see, the thumb stud fell out. I don't even know where it went. But I remember the day it fell out and I was like, oh, that sucks. And so I started looking for something new. And that kind of got me going. Now, in the meantime, so I had this knife, I had it for a long time. I had this knife. In the meantime, I picked up a couple of slip joints that were given to me along the way. And then it was about this time that I started looking seriously and started doing some research. There was the internet and I was looking at videos and I was trying to figure out what to get. And this was the knife that I settled on. And you can see it's a big departure from this, but it's definitely getting back closer to this, okay? And so I bought this knife next because at the time I was like, hey, a knife just needs to be utilitarian, needs to work. And this one, from everything I could hear about it, really did. Now at the time I didn't know a lot else about knives, but of course this is a Rat Model 1. Now I know a lot more. And I made a really good pick. This is a phenomenal knife. And I carried this knife again for a really long time. Now, as I carried this knife, I picked up some other knives along the way, but nothing was a major consideration. This knife, though, did get me interested in knives. I started thinking, hey, there's a lot of really cool knives out there. And I started getting some, especially some cheaper ones, because I wasn't, I was still at a point where I was like, hey, I'm not going to spend more than, whatever, $40 on a knife. And really, there's no reason to. It's not like, this knife is phenomenal. It will pretty much do anything you would need a knife to do, okay? So there's not really much reason to spend much beyond that, but eventually I did, and I was interested in a lot of different knives, but the one that really excited me, and this was only a few years ago, I had some others, and I picked up some others. I picked up a number between this one and this one, but the knife that I was really excited about for a really long time was the Cold Steel Code 4. I think this was new in 2013. And this was a significant knife because of the fact that I did a lot of research. I was convinced that it was a significant step up from the Rat Model 1, and I'm still convinced that. And now it's a much bigger step up because of the excellent steel. But that was a knife that was really interesting to me. Another knife that I'll show you that was really, really influential is the Cold Steel Recon 1. And the reason this knife was really influential, and the reason I was so excited to get it, and I still love this knife. It's a great knife, guys. But the reason I was so excited to get it is because if you guys remember the show Warriors and what is it? Deadliest Warrior. That show, Deadliest Warrior, the Navy SEALs carried, or the offering that they gave for the Navy SEAL knife was a Cold Steel Recon 1, and they said that, and I actually wrote it down while I was watching this show, and I was like, no way, that's the folding knife the Navy SEALs carry. That must be the greatest knife ever. Well, now I kind of know a little bit more about how that works, and I know that there are a lot of different knives that the Navy SEALs have carried and do carry, and largely it's because companies if they can even get one Navy SEAL to carry it for 1 week on duty, they're going to make the claim, hey, this is the knife that the Navy SEALs carry. Okay, so I'm aware of that now. I wasn't so much at the time. So that had a big influence on me, and I knew that. I wrote it down, and I waited a long time until I finally got a Recon 1. When I was first getting into knives, when I bought this one, the Recon 1 at I don't know, what, 80 bucks Canadian was like, whoa, that's really expensive for a knife. Now, obviously, I don't think that's quite so as expensive as I used to, but again, guys, that's a knife that really interested me. Another knife that was sort of a stepping point in my collection and my interest was this knife. This is the Benchmade Barrage. Really cool knife, very, very fast assisted knife. It's, you know, notice a trend here in size. I tend to like larger knives, but this was cool because Benchmade had the program where you could pick your scales and your steel and your finish. And so I went with S30V and the different colored scales with the orange backspacer. I thought that looked really cool. Still think it looks really cool. And the black blade. And I think I'd still go with something similar to this. I really like this knife. But that's kind of, and now finally, I've got one more knife to show you. This is the Brad Southard Talc. Now, when the Southard flipper came out from Spyderco, I was pretty interested in it, and I have had 2 Southards. I just can't seem to keep them. Actually, I think I've had 3, and I just can't seem to keep them. But this knife is really, really cool. And my biggest issue with the Southard was I thought it flipped great blade shape, and of course this shares a lot of those features. What I didn't like was the size, and so this really remedies that. You can see that this is a larger knife. Now, what's interesting is along the way, I can tell you, I haven't really stopped being interested in any of these categories, okay? So I still like the budget flippers. I mean, I still like the budget folders. I still like cold steel. I love cold steel, and especially now what they've done in 2015, they've become even that much more. I still like assisted openers. I still like Benchmade. What I will tell you is that all of these knives interest me. They interest me for different reasons. I love finding the best possible thing I can for the money. I love finding knives that have a high degree of fit and finish and are a little more exclusive. I think there's the similarity between this knife and this knife, even though they seem so far apart, is for me at the time, I didn't know a lot of people that had this knife when I bought it. It looked to me to be unique and to be a little bit different and to allow me to carry something in my pocket that I knew not a lot of other people would have. And this knife does the same thing, okay? Obviously the price point is significantly different. The fit and finish is massively different. You know, the materials are way superior on this, but it does a similar thing in that when I'm carrying this, I know I've got something that's a little bit unique that a lot of people are not going to be carrying around a Southern Talc. Okay, but also, I mean, I really, really like the knife. I looked at it. There are lots of knives that not a lot of people would have that I just don't like. But this knife I love in terms of its features and its size and its weight and its blade steel and all that kind of stuff. This is not a review, but there you go. So guys, what I'd like to hear from you after watching all of this is what got you interested in knives? What was your first knife? Maybe you're still looking for your first knife and you're going to share what it's going to be. I'd love to hear what you're waiting for to come in the mail, what you're excited about. And I'd love to hear why you keep an interest in knives. What kind of keeps you going? What are you looking for next? And what do you enjoy about carrying a knife? Further, one last question for you. Were there people in your life growing up that carried a knife? Is that the influence? Or are you making a huge departure and you're the only one you know who carries a knife, but you're really into it? There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it was kind of a little rambling, but it was just kind of fun for me to make. So there you go. We'll talk to you later.